Thank you all so much for joining us today. This is a really, really important subject. And it's often a subject that's uncomfortable. And so we appreciate you all in taking the initiative and making time on a busy Saturday. You know, it's beautiful weather outside and you could be anywhere else. And so we appreciate you all taking the time to join us. As an introduction, my name is Aman Ali. I'm a filmmaker based in New York City, talking to y'all from my apartment in Manhattan. But I just want to thank the folks at the MCC for not only inviting myself and these folks to join this conversation, but to hold these important events like this. It's important to put together events that are for the community to address important subjects. And especially during this pandemic, this is on the forefront of each and every one of our minds. And so may Allah reward each and every one of you for joining us, and also for the folks at the MCC for putting this event together. And so as a background, like I said, my name is Aman, and I did a documentary called Two Gods, and it's about a Black American Muslim casket maker in Newark, New Jersey, who takes two boys under his wing to use the lens of death to teach them about life. And so these boys in the film wash bodies, build coffins, and through the lens of death, he's teaching these kids that their own lives are worth living. So I'm just going to play some of y'all. We sent a link to the film for y'all to watch in advance, and so some of y'all had a chance to watch it. But if not, totally all good. That link is available for you guys to watch throughout the weekend. But I'm going to play a quick clip from the documentary. This aired on PBS nationwide a couple weeks ago. But I'm just going to play a quick clip, and in this scene, you will see an 8-year-old boy participate in the janaza process. So let me just cue that up real quick. One second here. All right, Munir, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Cool.
A little training here.
How would you do that? All right.
Alaikum salam.
How you doing?
You put your thumbs in here, like this, and the other one, and then you put your gloves so that the water and everything is different. But she should take the sweater because she don't want stuff, you know.
I need. You already cleaned them up? No, all right, so we'll go ahead and just start that process. No water, correct. Got your, when you wash it, all you're doing is raising here. So you just thoroughly, always your left hand in those areas. So one brother hold it out like this here, another one wash, correct?
The second time I did the washing, it was a friend of mine. It was an honor and opportunity being able to help the ones that got called home and knowing my time is coming. And Rashad pretty much put me under his wing.
What's important is you give them their right, which is wash them properly. And while you're taking pride into doing what you're doing because they're no longer able to do it for themselves, you're receiving the benefit and the mercy from your Creator. The benefit and the blessing that comes from it. Who doesn't need 40 major sins removed? Who doesn't need all your sins removed?
What you learned today is you learned what happens to a Muslim after they die. And in case I was to get killed or I was to die of natural causes, what you supposed to do to me? Wash my right side, wash my left side, clean me up, shroud me, right? Right?
Yes.
Yeah, just tighten up.
Okay, great. So this is just a quick snippet from the film, just to give you a flavor of if you haven't had a chance to watch. It's a really important scene as well. There's a lot to unpack. And Hamza, we've been really fortunate with the response that our film has gotten. Not only from the press and the industry. New York Times rated it as a critics pick. Hamza, we won a couple awards at film festivals. But aside from the superficial things, it's one of the reasons why we want to do an event like this is it brings out a lot of reflections in people based on your experiences, based on your upbringings. And death is a subject that very often we don't really think about, right? Many of us, we don't think about it until we have to actually like deal with it. And I know from experience, having lost my dad a couple years ago, it's so overwhelming when you lose a loved one and then all of a sudden you have to start making important decisions about burials and wills and estates and navigating all of this. And we realized that, and I'm sure Brother Abdurrahman in his funeral work, who's going to be joining us later, can attest to this, that it's very important to have these conversations now, to sit down with your loved ones and put together a will, talk to your parents about important end of life care decisions while they're alhamdulillah happy and healthy and of sound mind, because these situations are going to come up. And Allah's, our time comes and Allah's calling will come for each and every one of us. And it's important to do these things now so that when these things happen, and when they will happen, it makes it easier to grieve peacefully without worrying about having to navigate all of these difficult subjects. And for us as filmmakers, my brother directed this film and I produced it. It was important to capture this subject as well because Islam speaks so beautifully about death, and the process is so beautiful how the community really steps up to take care of a beloved sister or brother as they prepare for the next chapter of their journey. And so it was important for us to capture that in this film and really celebrate this beautiful tradition, because many of us, maybe we've prayed at a janazah, but maybe we haven't seen the actual process until we've had to wash one of our loved ones. And so it was important for us to celebrate that in a very poetic in a beautiful way. And a question we often get is the name of the film, Two Gods. Why the name of this film called Two Gods? And it actually came from a conversation that we had with one of the funeral directors. And he said, the problem that a lot of people have today is they try to worship two gods. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? He said, well, people are trying to worship Allah and the streets, the dunya at the same time. And very often we fixate so much on survival and trying to get by today that we're not thinking about tomorrow, not thinking about our future. And the central conflict of faith is people that try to worship two gods at the same time. Obviously in Islam, we believe in one God. And so part of thinking about death is living our life with purpose. This doesn't have to be a morbid, a depressing subject, but when we start thinking about our time will come, it helps put our life in a much more purposeful way. And so I wanted to show you a quick, our brother Hanif, who is the main subject of the film. He's an incredible man. He's a very busy person as well, and he's actually in the midst of doing a janazah right now, so he couldn't join us today, but he did record a quick message that I wanted to play for you all real quick. Let me just play that, cue that up. one, go.
Assalamu alaikum to MCC. I want to say, give y'all my great thanks y'all for watching, the documentary of myself. Also want to say whatever that may have shown. I want to give back. What I'm doing actually, sorry, is giving back to my experience in my life and the things that I had done in my life. So what I was trying to touch bases on, and I'm praying that y'all really understood that, what y'all seen then and then what y'all seen after the fact, and even at the end of it. I want to know that the impact, I want to say to y'all that the impact that I'm putting on is really for to reach out for my life, because it's about me and things that I had been through. So what I'm basically doing was sharing with the people, which is the community, and also the young brothers that I was mentoring that had to be a major part of my life. So I want to say thank y'all again for even paying attention to where I was at and where I'm at today. So where I'm at today is just moving forward on other things that we looking forward on doing. And inshallah ta'ala, y'all also have an opportunity to see it again. Inshallah.
Thank you to Brother Hanif. And one thing that I can share a quick anecdote about Hanif, just to tell you, just a testament to not only who he is, but people that work in the end of life care and even funeral space. Hanif literally every day sends me a text message in the morning, every day at like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning saying, "Assalamu alaikum, I love you, bro." Every single day. I've known this guy for like 6 years now when we started filming with him. And it really just speaks to the testament of all the sisters and brothers that work in this space. They have the biggest hearts, and it is such a blessing to have people like this in every community. And so it's important to take the time to thank those folks because they truly do the most, it's thankless work. And it's important to recognize that they really are important pillars of our community that really help families navigate through difficult times. And so we have a lot to go over today. And again, we want to make sure that we answer a lot of your questions. And some of you all have sent us questions in advance, and feel free to drop questions in the chat. But an important one that comes up, and that's why we're really excited to have Dr. Rami Salah with us, is end of life care conversations. Because I don't know about y'all if you're similar. In my experience, I am a first generation Muslim American. My family was born overseas, but regardless where you're from, but we are young professionals working, and our parents that worked, dedicated their whole lives to taking care of us, supporting us, in some ways gave up their hopes and dreams so that we could chase ours. We're now in a position where we are starting to take on that responsibility of taking care of them, right? And that can be an honor and a blessing. And at the same time, that can be very stressful and that can be overwhelming. We can very often feel like we don't know how to navigate these situations. And especially when we live in families that have siblings, that can be difficult as well. This is my role. I'm the oldest. I'm the youngest. This is what mom would want, what dad would have wanted. This is a very, very difficult time. And it's important for us as family members to come together to talk about these situations. And what's great is folks like Dr. Rami are very well-versed in these discussions. Dr. Rami Salah is a well-known doctor in Palo Alto that focuses on hospice and end-of-life care. And so he's going to talk a little bit about, just to give you a overall view of this very important subject. And we also want to take some time to answer a lot of your questions. So without further ado, I will toss it over to Brother Rami.
Jazakallah khair, Aman, and thank you first and foremost to Aman for putting together such a thoughtful and raw documentary that I had the chance to watch yesterday. I definitely encourage folks who haven't watched it to take the time to. And thanks for everyone joining. I actually like small intimate groups around this discussion because sometimes it does get lost when there are many people. So I'm hoping that it's more of a conversation. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about a lot of things and touch on things. It was hard to fit in how much I wanted to say in a short amount of time. So I hope it just kind of, scratches the surface, maybe stirs something within you to start having these conversations, like Brother Aman said. It's interesting, end of life, even just the words end of life, when I say them, although it makes sense kind of practically speaking, Islamically speaking, or spiritually speaking, it doesn't fit our worldview and what we get from our own deen in terms of where we came from and where the soul is going afterwards. So to start off, I wanted to just touch very briefly on death and dying in Islam and what we can learn from some of the prophetic hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I like to always start off these talks with a quote from Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, may Allah preserve him, in his essay, Death and Dying in the Afterlife in the Holy Quran, which he says, without death, it is questionable whether we would have any need for religion at all. At a fundamental level, religion's greatest claim is making sense of the reality of death, which relentlessly impinges on our living consciousness. I mean, think for a second what your deen would mean, what Islam would mean if there wasn't something called death waiting for us at the end of our lives. It wouldn't make sense. So it's important to recognize that death and dying is integral to our spirituality and our faith. Just two hadith that I wanted to bring up. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked, who are the wisest? And he responded, أَكْثَرُهُمْ لِلْمَوْتِ ذِكْرًا, those who remember death most often. وَأَحْسَنُهُمْ لِمَا بَعْدَهُ اسْتِعْدَادًا أُولَٰئِكَ الْأَكْيَاسِ, and who is the best in preparing for what's after it, those are the wisest. And he said, أَكْثَرُ ذِكْرَ هَذِمَ اللَّذَّاتِ, remember often the ender of pleasures. Like Aman said, people don't want to think about death. There was a French writer who wrote, death is like the sun and can't be stared at steadily, right? You can't think about death all the time, and we shy away from it. But it is a spiritual practice, and one that's, supported by the prophetic hadith, to remember often death. Another one, and I put the picture of thorns there because we know the hadith that nothing pricks the skin of a Muslim, or no harm befalls a Muslim except that their sins are forgiven, even if it's the prick of a thorn. And there was a story when a man who had died, and another man who was in the company of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi said, "Hani'an lah," oh, he was fortunate. Mat wa lam yubtala bimarad, he died and he wasn't tried by an illness. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi responded, "Wayhak," he said, "Woe to you. How would you know that if he was tried by an illness, some of his sins would have been forgiven?" And it's important. This idea of redemptive suffering is important in our deen. Now, I always like to make it a point, because I see this by Muslim patients when people are suffering at the end of life, to use this as a sort of okay or permission to sign up for very harmful treatments at the end of life. And I, as a palliative care doctor in this field, I'd say that a person is suffering enough from their disease, from their cancer, from their heart failure, from whatever it is, and causing undue suffering from treatments, whether it's life support, CPR, or chemotherapy, or whatever comes up at the end of life. There's a big difference between those things, right? In fact, avoiding harm is integral to Islamic bioethics. لا ضرر ولا ضرار في الإسلام. There shall be no infliction nor reciprocation of harm, and that extends into medical ethics. So now, just for the remainder of the time, I'm going to walk you through a case built off a real case of a 70-year-old Muslim man traveling from the Middle East, and right upon landing in the States, he was rushed to the emergency room and was acutely ill, and it was found to have a large clot in his lungs. And after a few days go by, he was in the ICU, and he's needing maximum support, short of life support, meaning intubation, and hooked up to a ventilator. I know this has become common speak with COVID now, so people know what I'm talking about. So palliative care, which is a specialty in medicine that deals with people with serious illness and communication and symptom management, they were consulted to help the conversation. Now, the son comes by, flies out a few days into the course, and he's from Saudi Arabia, and a family meeting is held. And when the doctors or the staff brought up the idea of, okay, what's next to be done? in terms of intubation, the son exclaims, "In my religion, we do everything. If we must intubate, then intubate." This is a scene that I've seen in my family, treating Muslim patients many times when we fall on religion and our understanding of our deen to help dictate medical decisions.
And Dr. Ahmed, can you explain what intubate means?
Yeah, so intubate is a tube that doctors put down the windpipe to both force air in and out of the lungs. Many times it's brought up to say, help you breathe. It's not helping you breathe. It is literally breathing for you. So without a ventilator, people would die. So it's life support. It's often, used interchangeably. So I wanted to reflect really quickly on medical decision-making at the end of life for Muslims and some of the themes that I think in having these talks and seeing it in the hospital, what I come up with. Number one, there is a level of mistrust, much like any other racial or religious minority in the States founded on religious or racist discrimination and bigotry on the part of the healthcare system. That is a real thing that's there. There is a level of mistrust that Muslims and their families come to the healthcare system. Number two, I think I can say this since I'm a Muslim and I come from a Muslim family, we don't do well with emotions. We don't do well with grief. I think we are poor emotional processors for the most part, if I can, paint everyone with one giant brush. And I think there's work to do around grief and processing emotions. Number three is duties to Allah are amplified. Even if a person is not practicing for their life, the majority of their life, when they are confronted by death, because there is a fundamental belief of the afterlife, the akhirah, and meeting Allah, duties to Allah are then amplified, right? What can I do? What is halal? What is haram? And in doing that, people turn to imams. And I gotta say, I feel for imams. I feel for imams who are not only custodians of masjids, are not only, overseeing weddings and nikahs and funeral processions and teaching deen and Quran and talking about kids and marriage counselors. And now you're going to pull them in to say, hey, withdrawal of life support, is that halal or haram? That's impossible to do as an imam, let alone just one clinician who's seen it, right? So I think it puts imams in an unfair predicament. And lastly, there is an overemphasis on fiqh, I'd say, and legal aspects of actions at the end of life. What is haram, right? What is halal? Although the movie was shot in black and white, it's not black and white when a person is dying, right? There's a lot of nuances. And I'd say that an ethical approach of not necessarily what you can and can't do, but one of what you should and shouldn't do is a better lens to look at the medical decision-making near the end of life. So going to the legalistic approach, I'm going to fly by this. There have been fiqh councils around the world and throughout time to help say, hey, withholding and withdrawing life support, when is it okay? And as you can see, you can read through some of these rulings. They're both vague and they're also, they rely on medical data or at least medical judgment. So these fiqh councils, I mean, who's going to dictate whether a person has no chance of survival or if treatments are futile, right? That goes to the clinician's judgment. And I want to paint for you a scene that maybe some of you have seen, maybe some of you have been part of. If you look at three parties at end of life, if someone is on life support, the doctor, the patient, and an imam who's pulled in. Well, the doctor, because the way we practice here in America, autonomy is the most important. They're going to look to the patient, hey, what do you want? The patient, now my duties are to God, I got to get some religious guidance on this, is going to turn to the imam. And as you saw from the different fiqh councils, if they're doing it right, they'd go back and turn to the doctors to say, what is futile, what is, appropriate, what's not. To make the picture worse, usually a family member, and it's not usually the family member who's been in it with the patient through all their chemotherapy sessions or all their doctor's appointments. It's usually the family member from out of state who flies in, who knows somebody who had the same disease and lived 10 years later because of the doctor they saw. And they bring in this idea, which really just obscures the picture and the plan. And then from the hospital standpoint, because the hospital has its own incentives, sometimes they have to bring committees like ethics committees to weigh on a case. This is chaos. this is not how people should die, right? Because all the meanwhile, while these conversations are happening and these conflicts are arising and these arguments are taking place, the patient is suffering. And that to me is the greatest failure of all this. So bringing it back to the case, and I promise I'm going to end really quickly. There was at least one fatwa from Saudi Arabia in the 80s about DNR orders. Do not attempt to resuscitate order. If someone dies, don't do compressions, just allow a natural death. And what they ruled is that a patient is unfit for resuscitation if 3 doctors, trustworthy doctors in the words of the fatwa, say that the disease is unresponsive and death is certain, or there's some mental inactivity and untreatable brain damage, or resuscitation would be ineffective. And in fact, in this fatwa, it goes on to say that the doctors don't have to turn to the family regarding this because they are unqualified to make these decisions. A very paternalistic, I'd say, approach, not passing judgment on one way or another. So I actually am there with the son. And I bring up this fatwa because, hey, I'm well-versed and I read up on this, and let me put that hat on to see if I can, break through a barrier. But he looks to me and exclaims, look, I'm the doctor of the family, and I don't want to be seen as the one who decided our mom should die. Immediately, it threw me in for a loop because I approached it all wrong. Here is a human being. Forget that he's Muslim for a second. Forget that he's a doctor for a second. Forget that he's a son of a woman who's dying for a second. He's a human being with emotions. And in fact, he needed help processing those emotions before getting to the actual medical decision. So I just wanted to introduce advanced care planning just as a concept. This is better read backwards, planning for your care in advance. So having these conversations, putting pen to paper in advance with your family members is important to do now. There's a proverb: the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. So making sure that you have these discussions with your families is so important to help guide those. I'm going to skip through that. To help guide through these discussions, I just want to focus on quality of life, which actually doesn't have a good translation into Arabic. My mentor and friend, Dr. Kamal Abu Shamsiya, actually says the closest is al-aish bil-karama, the living with dignity, and how we define dignity for ourselves. So questions to ask yourself when having these questions: what brings you joy? What gives my life purpose or meaning? What would matter to me at the end of life the most? Or where would I like to be if I had the choice to be when I would die? And in hearing the answers, many Muslims would respond with communicating with loved ones is something very important for people. Being pain-free as much as possible, not suffering, physical suffering. Having the mental awareness to not only communicate with loved ones, but to worship Allah, having taklif, right? Accountability in front of Allah and worshiping Him. And of course, one that comes up, especially from mothers all the time, is not to be a burden for loved ones. They can't find that quality of life acceptable for them. And I think centering medical decisions around not the medical data, not the CAT scans, not the lab values, but in fact, a person's values, how they define quality of life for themselves or dignity for themselves. I think that should be front and center. So this is an advanced directive. I put on a website, if you want to take a picture of this slide, I think it's the one action item that I would say everyone should do. Everybody over the age of 18 should have an advanced directive, regardless of health status, prognosis, whatever it is. So fill this out. Name a surrogate decision maker, someone who knows you well enough to make decisions on your behalf, and write down your preferences. And I think that's pretty much it for my presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Alhamdulillah, thank you for that, Dr. Ami. That is so many important things you talked about there, especially because this, understandably so, is an incredibly emotional moment in our lives, and nothing honestly can truly prepare you for these things until they happen. And yeah, it is important to sit down and talk about those things. And alhamdulillah, before my dad passed, that is something that we did. We sat down with him and we said, okay, if you're in a situation where you're on a ventilator, what do you want us to do? And he told us exactly. He said, if there is no hope, then if it's going to have an adverse impact on me, then yes, I want you all to do not resuscitate. And that way there wasn't any vague interpretation. This is what dad would have wanted. Are you trying to kill dad? What are you trying to do? This and that. I've had friends where they're forced to make that interpretation because they didn't have that conversation. And that 5-minute conversation months before my dad passed, alhamdulillah, made things so much easier. So yeah, definitely recommend going to that site. And it's something that a family member may have a decision now, but maybe a few months later they decide to change their mind, or maybe when they become sick they say actually don't or do something different, and that's okay. It's important though to start those conversations and think about those things. I can't stress enough how it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, it's never a good time, but I promise you, when you sit down and have that conversation, it brings your family closer together and it makes things so much more bearable. And it's, again, it's hard to navigate, especially with siblings, people dispute. It's super important. And so we got a couple questions that Dr. Ami that did come in a situation where, and I know, as you pointed out, these are not black and white issues. These are so nuanced from an Islamic perspective, but oftentimes there's a situation where somebody is on a ventilator and from a medical perspective, a doctor will say, the machine is breathing for them. And there's really no, from a doctor's perspective, there's no hope that they're going to be able to make it on their own. From your perspective and from your research, what advice would you give to a family to approach that situation?
Yeah, and it comes up often. If those discussions weren't had ahead of time, I would say a couple of things. Number one is it is important to take clinical judgment from those who know situations like that very seriously, right? To listen to the doctors, to listen. I mean, I'm just saying, hear the doctor's recommendations. Secondly, put your parent, friend, brother, sister, whoever it is, front and center, right? What would be acceptable to him or her, right? And then lastly, I think the frame of mind that we approach this question is, even when you said, I'm on no hope, for example, or people say the words withdrawal of care, right? Or, oh, there's nothing more we can do. No, there's always something we do. There is a million and one ways we care for patients. That includes sometimes removing harm from a patient. So if you feel that you're causing more harm than benefit, right, then I'd say it is acceptable to remove that harm. In fact, from an Islamic bioethical standpoint, there is a maxim, which translates to removal of harm actually takes precedence over provision of good. And so taking that as well from a fiqh perspective, seeking medical treatments when it is uncertain whether these medical treatments would work is not obligatory. It's not mandated from a fiqhi standpoint. Then there is room to have those discussions and remove harm and allow people to pass naturally if that's something that fits within their goals of care. So yeah, it's a very loaded question, but I hope that some of those things help guide the conversations.
Yeah, and we will, after this, we're going to be recording this event. So we'll send you all a recording from it and also some additional resources, some talking points on how to start these conversations. Because again, these are super, super important subjects and we all are going to deal with them. We've in different degrees if you all haven't dealt with them already. It's important to talk about these things now. A question came up is, and I know it's a field that you're very familiar with, is the last few years of a person's life. Let's say there's a situation where a parent has been diagnosed with dementia and they need to get additional care. And culturally, for many families, you know, our parents are supposed to live with us when they get older, but we may not have the home and the resources to really give our parents the care that they need. Can you talk a little bit about within the Bay Area community, if there's organizations or nursing centers or even other places that people can go to get additional care?
Oh, there's such a paucity of caregiver resources. And in fact, you touched on this, Aman. I mean, I think our generation, if you're in your 30s and 40s, and as our parents get older, I think there's going to be a crisis nationwide in terms of caregiving. Uh, we're not equipped for it because people are living much longer with chronic illness than ever before. And the burdens of caregiving sometimes are just insurmountable because the family structures have changed. I mean, compared to where they are traditionally or how they are overseas. And in fact, in our home countries where our parents came from, it's changing there too. So yes, homes, assisted livings come up, you know, and sometimes there's a lot of emotion on that in terms of looking for placement. And then caregiving, hiring caregivers tends to be something that people have to at least discuss. And it's, especially here in the Bay Area, expensive. It is very, very, very expensive. So planning around that is important from a here and now perspective. Yeah, so I don't know of any resources in specific. I would say many doctors' offices have social workers who know the lay of the land, depending on what geography you're in. So getting in touch with social workers, if that's something you're thinking about, it's always good to get started now.
Yeah, a lot of great questions coming in. This question I like, but it's an important one. How can Muslims in the U.S. unite to build a Muslim hospital? We don't need more masjids. I'm sure it's something you've thought about as well, working in the field. That yes, it's beautiful. We have Jewish hospitals and Catholic hospitals, Presbyterian, Lutheran hospitals, and I know there have been a lot of Muslim nonprofit health clinics. Are you aware of any particular broader initiatives to build like nursing centers and even just hospitals along those lines? Or
I wish there was one in Australia, a nursing home from Muslims that was built in Australia, which looked amazing, and I wish we had something similar here. And unfortunately, we're so late to the game that regulations around building clinics or hospitals have been more than they've ever been before, for good reason, if you ask me. But also, it serves as a lot of barriers. So I don't know of any efforts, and I've actually been asked this question more than once because it is something that we should, take seriously as a community. I just don't know.
Yeah. There's a question that came in, and this is definitely deserves it, a session in and of itself, is how to cope with the loss of a loved one. And this is not a black and white issue by any means. And I will share from my own experience and from my own observations and talking to people. And I always tell people it's okay to not be okay. And it's important when you lose a loved one to give yourself the space to grieve. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be depressed. The Prophet ﷺ, when he mourned the loss of one of his wives and his companions, he took the time and he was depressed. He was sad for many, many months, and that's okay. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel numb. It's okay to feel confused. It's just important to give yourself the space to sit with your emotions. And when you grieve, there's people are going to tell you, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. Everybody has their own journey. Everybody has their own process. And so it's important to give yourself that space. There's no magical thing that I can tell you, that Dr. Rami can tell you, that anybody can tell you, that helps a wand and makes things go away. We each have our own journey. My father passed away 3 years ago at this point, and it is still difficult. And there's moments, there's little things that remind you of things, and that's okay. And that is a part of life, and that is a part of each and every one of our journeys. And so it's not easy. It's not difficult, and it's important to embrace that. And I'm sure, Dr. Rami, you've had to deal with that as a doctor in dealing with patients that are grieving. I don't know if there's anything that you had to share on the subject here.
I think everything that you said, I mean, especially looking at the seerah of how the Prophet ﷺ mourned, how his companions mourned his death, like Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he was met with the news, he was angry, he was in denial, all the different emotions around grief and grieving. So it is okay to feel those emotions. If the Prophet ﷺ and who he is, if Umar and his conviction and strength had those emotions, who are we not to? So I would echo the things that you said. One valuable resource that I think, as people are near the end of lives or their lives or afterwards, is Muslim chaplains, which I think are becoming fully, more and more in number as time goes on. I think it's a field that we need more of to help with these sort of emotions, to help spiritual distress for people who are feeling it when they're met with illness or with death. So if your institution, or if you know of people who are in the Muslim chaplaincy world, definitely reach out too.
Yeah. And somebody brought up a question in the chat. My sister passed away last May, and I feel like my grief is affecting my family. And again, each and every one of us has a journey. Sister, thank you for the question. And I can share from my experience. I have 4 brothers, and we all dealt with the loss of our dad in different ways. And it was important for us to give each other the space to grieve how we choose to, right? If somebody feels completely withdrawn from the family and doesn't want to hang out or talk or this or that, it's important to give them that space. Obviously, it's important to, be proactive and try to do things. I can't recommend enough, as someone that has benefited just from therapy in general, not just because of this. I see a therapist regularly. That works for me. Other people, it's writing, it's exercising, it's poetry, it's watching something and talking about it. And everybody has their own process. And in a family, we're all going to grieve differently. And we shouldn't, it's a well-intended thing. It's like, oh, am I bringing other people down by bringing up somebody dying? I don't want to be a downer. I don't want to feel like a burden when I keep bringing this up. Each and every one of us has a journey. And it's important that in our families, we give each other the space to do that. My mom, understandably so, takes it very hard, and that's okay. We all love her. We give her care. We show her support. It's just important to realize that our relationships with loved ones is very different across the family. Maybe somebody looked at sister, maybe somebody had this relationship with your sister, so they're taking it differently. And maybe you have a relationship that's different, and your parents have a different relationship. And so it's important for each and every one of us to honor that. And so if somebody is grieving, our response should be, okay, how can I best support that person, to give them love, to give them support, and at times give them space when they need that. And so we shouldn't feel bad if we feel like our grief is coming off as a burden. A question that just came up: if an elderly person who's in a wheelchair bound is losing weight because they don't want to eat, what is the Islamic perspective on putting that person on a G-tube for feeding?
Yeah. Another question that has multiple interpretations, and it really depends who you ask, to be honest. It really depends, I think, from a medical standpoint, what this elderly person has in terms of a disease or a diagnosis. We know, for example, from a medical standpoint, for people with advanced dementia, that not eating is the natural progression of the disease, right? People lose their ability to walk, they lose their ability to talk, and then they lose their ability to eat. And in fact, when they've done studies to see if G-tube either improve mortality, meaning survival, lengthens their lives, or at least from the caregivers and what they can perceive as improving a quality of life, it had no intended benefit. It doesn't mean starve the person, right? If you want to hand feed and have that at least attempt, you should. Keep their mouth moist, because dry mouth is terrible. You should. And at the same time, you should not feel pushed or it's not an imperative to pursue medical artificial nutrition and hydration. I actually don't even like calling it tube feeds, because there's so much more around feeding than nutrition, right? Food is love, food is culture, food is being a parent, food is nurturing, food is holidays, all of this. And then we talk about it in a medical standpoint, and you can't, right? You can't marry those two approaches. So I would say that it really depends on who you ask, and it really depends on the clinical status, but there is room to not pursue a G2, both from a medical and, I think, an ethical standpoint.
And keep the questions coming. There's some questions in the chat, and the folks on Facebook, we see some of your questions as well, and we'll definitely get to those. A question that came up, are there Muslim chaplains for counseling? In general, I don't know if there's, not to put you on the spot, do you know any good resources that people can reach out to in the Bay Area that may not necessarily have to be Muslim, but just at least well-versed in dealing with people of color issues, or people of Islamic backgrounds? Or
I think, yes, there are. In fact, we have a Muslim chaplain on the call today. Ziyada is a group that I'm a part of, made up mostly of Muslim chaplains who have some resources. I encourage you to check out the website. It's ziyara.org, I think. So there is a group of Muslim chaplains, absolutely. Now, I would say that chaplains and counselors are different in their roles, right? Chaplains have a specific role in terms of spiritual distress, spiritual care. And I think it's a underutilized service or resource, but check that out.
Great. And yeah, and I can't stress enough the importance of therapy. I know I'm on my soapbox right now, but it's a part of everyday care. Like the way I go to a dentist to get my teeth checked out, why wouldn't I want to do the same for my heart? Am I going to give better care to my teeth than my heart? If my laptop is broken, I take it to the Mac store, to the Apple store, to get it looked at. Like, why is my laptop getting better care than my heart and my soul? And it doesn't mean that you're crazy or dealing with this or diagnose this and that. It's just proactive mental wellness. It's just a part of how, it's an extension of that. And I understand there's cultural stigma and all that, but it's nonsense. And it's important to proactively do this. It's not just reactive, oh, I'm dealing with this, so I have to deal with that, or I'm good, my life is fine. It's a proactive thing. The same way I get checkups, twice a year, and I go to the dentist every 6 months. I see a therapist every week. I have stuff that comes up, and especially during this pandemic. In this pandemic, a lot of us don't realize that in different ways, we're all dealing with grief, because our lives that we lived before the pandemic are fundamentally different right now. And so we're grieving our old lives, and death is around us. And there's so much happening, not only with the pandemic, but just social unrest, the world, war, the economy, this and that. That's a lot for each and every one of us to take in. And sometimes I don't think we realize, like, just the level of trauma that each and every one of us is dealing with. And I'm sure, especially as parents, it can be super difficult to raise children during this. A question that just came up, and we'll take this question, and then we will keep the questions going, but I definitely do want to get to Brother Abdurrahman next. But what does Islam say on the use of morphine? Working in hospice, I see families, including Muslim families, have so much fear about using it. Can you talk a little bit about that, and just painkillers and other medications in general?
Thank you, Arwa, for bringing that up. That is something that comes up a lot, not just from Muslim patients and families, but even Muslim doctors who have some kind of discomfort around providing morphine at the end of life. Morphine and opioids like it definitely help with suffering at the end of life. It does. Now, theoretically, a lot of the discomfort comes from the idea of it hastening death. All right. There's a theoretical thing that morphine depresses our respiratory drive and therefore can hasten death. Ethically speaking, the intention of qasd, or intention, is one that's very important. So that if Your intention is to relieve suffering. And if an unintended, seemingly bad consequence were to happen from that, then it is still permissible and good, in my opinion, to relieve that suffering. Again, لا ضرر ولا ضرار في الإسلام. No harm should be inflicted or reciprocated in Islam. I'd say that it's not a blanket statement. I actually ask my patients, and I prescribe opioids a lot in the field that I'm in for people near the end of their lives. And I say, listen, some people would rather be, because some of the side effects of opioids are sleepiness and drowsiness and sometimes confusion. Some people are okay with that as long as their pain is controlled. And other people would rather deal with pain if it gives them more moments of lucidity and being awake. Where are you in that spectrum? And therefore, a person can say their personal preference of, I would rather deal with pain and be awake, or no, this pain is unbearable. Treat it with everything you have, regardless of the side effects. So there is definitely room to treat symptoms near the end of life for people who are dying.
On a related note, I'm sure you deal with this a lot as well. There's a lot of like well-intended cultural practices when it comes to medicine, saying, oh no, just eat, drink some zamzam and take this black seed. You don't need all this treatment and medications. And again, there is benefits to holistic, all natural remedies and treatment, not only from a scientific perspective, but a medical perspective. But I'm sure very oftentimes in the hospital, you may deal with families that are really insistent on certain things. What is a healthy way to navigate that? Because it comes from a loving place. It comes from a very well-intended place, but what is the best way to diffuse some of those situations?
Explore it. Explore, like take the time, be curious. And I say this to doctors usually who, if you hear something about holistic medicine and you're just like, they roll their eyes. No, sit down, explore, be curious, learn about the experiences that made a person want to, look for holistic or non-Western pharmacologic treatments. I think there's room for that, to be honest with you. See what the patient is trying to accomplish or trying to avoid in either not signing up for more traditional medicines or going with the unconventional medicines. Explore and be curious.
Great. And keep the questions coming. We're going to go ahead and keep things moving, but we will actually real quick. Somebody asked, can you repeat the Saudi fatwa on end of life?
Oh, I think I responded to it, but I responded to the panelists. I'll just repeat it verbally.
Yeah.
A patient is unfit for resuscitation if 3 competent and trustworthy doctors say that the person's disease is unresponsive to treatment and death is certain. There's a state of mental inactivity or untreatable brain damage, or resuscitation would be ineffective. So those are the 3 points. You don't have to check all of them, just one or the other, according to the fatwa.
Great. Jazakallah khair, Dr. Rami. And again, keep the questions coming. If we have more time at the end, we'll definitely bring back Brother Rami to answer some more questions. But I definitely wanted to be mindful of time. And again, it's important to, like I said before, when it comes to death, very often we don't deal with it until it happens. And case in point, we often don't know about any of the janazah, the funeral services in our community until we lose someone and then we're Googling like Muslim funeral homes, Bay Area or something like that. And so it's important that we recognize all the extensive resources that are available in the community. And Brother Abdurrahman truly does thankless work alongside many other funeral directors in the Bay Area community. And it's important to really get a sense of what this process entails, what is it like, how much money do things cost, what should you expect, because I can't tell you enough. When you're grieving, the last thing you want to think about is filling out paperwork. And again, put together a will, pre-plan, set aside savings in advance so that this can be taken care of. You don't have to worry about what these costs are. In our family, we actually reserved burial plots just to get that done and over with for our mother, just to make things so much easier. Because I know Brother Rami has a lot of, Brother Abdurrahman has a lot of thoughts about this as well. But I'm going to go ahead and toss it over to Brother Abdurrahman to talk a little bit about the janazah process and in the state of California, what to expect, because this is going to happen to each and every one of us. And it's important that we at least get exposed to this so that we're not learning about this for the first time when we're just so overwhelmed with grief. And so without further ado, I'll toss it over to Brother Abdurrahman.
Jazakallahu khairan, Brother Aman and Rami, Dr. Rami. So my name is Abdurrahman, and I have with me, I don't know if you can see, Tamim. Tamim is Hafiz here. We both are, so we are not funeral director. We are here in Bay Area, and our local masajid here takes care of the ghusl basically, and work with the funeral director to get the paperwork. And so we have been doing this ghusl, and also work with the family to get their paperwork, to speed up their paperwork. So we've been doing this for last more than 10 years myself, and same with Brother Tamim here. So basically we are volunteers. We started off, 12 years or 14 years ago, one of my friends passed away. So I was there doing my first ghusl then. And then there was a need in the community for giving ghusl. And so I started doing that. And Tamim also joined me 10 years ago. So we've been doing that since then. So there are a lot of things that go after death, like Brother Aman mentioned. And so I'm going to basically go over, after the fact, when a person passes away, we get a call. So our masjid here, there is one masjid here in Bay Area. That's where I'm from, Fremont. There are over 60,000 to 75,000 deaths that we see in a year. And they are all the men, women, stillbirths, and young adults, all kinds, gunshot wounds, and all kind of unnatural deaths all come here into our masajid. So,
wait, did you say 60 to 70,000 deaths?
Yes.
Okay, just want to check.
So 60 to 70,000 deaths. So, but in the Bay Area, where, California Bay Area, we have 3 masajids that offer ghusl and work with the funeral director. We have a facility in the masjid, which I will show in a bit, that we do ghusl here and work with the funeral director. So what I plan to do in the next 20 or 30 minutes or 10 minutes is to go over the slides. Let me share my slide.
Actually, before you get to that, a question just came in.
Sure.
What are the names of the 3 masjids that you just referenced?
So the Lowry Masjid is the one that we are associated with. There is, it's called Islamic Society of East Bay. Islamic Society of East Bay, which is in Fremont. The other one is in MCA, which is in Santa Clara. And also we have one in Oakland, and there are other places as well in Stockton, as well as in Sacramento. So here we see around 60 to 75,000 a year, basically. And sometimes in a week, there are 4 or 5. And for men, so the men team takes care of the men, and then we have a women team that takes care of the women ghusl. So we have 3 morgues. So let me share my screen. So what I'm going to go through is basically what it takes to do the paperwork, the cost, and also we can jump into the practical aspect of ghusl and kafan, inshallah. So let me do that here. So this is it's called Lowry Masjid or Islamic Society of East Bay. So basically, I'm going to go over these, the basic process that involves, then do's and don'ts. Many people, these are key to note, and then we can jump into the ghusl and shrouding, inshallah. Basically, shrouding involves the kafan. So basically, what kind of we see so the kinds of death, basically we have natural deaths where the people generally they pass away naturally due to their long life or old age, or some could be due to illness and they've been in hospital for a long time. So they all fall under natural death, where you need a death certificate eventually. Then you have stillbirths, where you lose a baby before or during delivery. And there are two categories under them. One is less than 20 weeks, and then you have the 20 weeks and above. So the one under less than 20 weeks, you don't need a paperwork, basically. For anything about 20 weeks, stillbirth, early, later, or term, you will need a paperwork. And then you have unnatural death, due to accident, gunshot wounds, and all that. So these are the three kinds. And to bury an individual, you would need a burial permit. And to get a burial permit, the funeral director would, reach out to the doctor, and the doctor is the one who is supposed to state the cause of death. Merely stating, heart attack is not going to give a burial permit. It needs to be an underlying condition that resulted in a heart attack. So these are the three kinds of deaths that we see. And the one under less than 20 weeks, you don't need a paperwork. And sometimes in the hospitals, the Christians or anyone, they send it to the incinerator. They just, burn them off. But as Muslims, we can ask the hospital to give due to miscarriage, stuff to the family, and they can bury them in their backyard. And this is all, again, these are all these are all what happens here in California, and it can vary from state to state. So,
and real quick, so to get a death certificate, that's usually something that the hospital or the funeral home provides, right?
Yeah, it comes from the county. So basically, on the day of the death, you get a burial permit. 2 weeks after, the death certificate will be mailed. Gotcha. So that's what happens. So the key things here, do's and don'ts. This couple of things that I've listed here, and it's very critical to know. Unnatural deaths, as soon as, unnatural deaths could be car accidents, or gunshot wounds, any kind of an unnatural death. It could also be at home. A person is suffering from high blood pressure for many years, and then one night they pass away. So the first thing that you're supposed to do is call 911. And as soon as the police arrives, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to send the deceased to the coroners. And this is where we need to be careful. If you know that a person has been suffering, high blood pressure for a very long time, you want to immediately reach out to your doctor and get him involved right away, and make sure that the police doesn't send the deceased to the coroner's office. So those are the things which you have to keep an eye on. Or if a person is suffering for a long time, you need to make sure that your medical records are updated all the time. You are in touch with the doctors all the time. So in case of any unnatural death, you are there to call your doctor and prevent that individual being taken to the coroners. Because as soon as it goes to a coroner, they're going to do an autopsy, and that's what you don't want to do. So we have to be very careful when in case of any unnatural deaths, you don't want the deceased to be sent to the coroners. So that's very important. And get the medical records updated. You want to see the doctor often. You don't want to, because what happens is when a person passes away, and if you call a doctor, the doctor is saying, doctor is going to say that I don't know. You have never reached me. You never visited me for such a long time. I will not be in a position to give a cause of death. So when none of the doctors will be available to give cause of death, and that's where the coroners come in place. The coroner is going to do an autopsy and find the cause of death. The reason is why they have to do an autopsy is, you have to. It could be a drug. It could be a death due to drug, or it could be for any unnatural reasons. So the coroner is going to do an autopsy. He's going to cut open the chest and the head, and sometimes they lose parts. And sometimes coroners' offices are flooded with dead bodies, and they stack more than one in a morgue. Sometimes 3 or 4 are stacked in the coroner's morgue, and you don't want Muslim brothers or sisters to go through that. So the thing is that I generally tell or advise people here is to visit doctors often, keep your medical records updated, and be in touch with the doctor so that when you, at time of death, you can reach out to the doctor and the doctor is there to tell, I'm ready to sign the cause of death. It's only when a doctor is ready, you are able to get the burial permit. And it's only with the burial permit, you are able to bury the deceased. So it's very important to get the medical records updated. If the parents are alone, I suggest not to leave them alone. I have seen parents who have passed 3 days ago, just because no one is there to take care. He passed away alone in his home. And it's 3 days later, a son or a daughter comes in to find out that he's already passed away. So never to leave parents alone. And like, brother Rami mentioned, we, even in Bay Area, we don't have any elderly homes, or any care facilities where elderly can be taken care. So if you have an elderly parents, it's safe to keep them with you, and never to leave them alone. And then students,
On that note, yeah, especially making your house or whatever house your parents are staying in slip proof. So like having rubber mats on the floor, railings, easy to get around. Like that's super, super, super important because floors can get wet. It's very easy to slip. And yeah, it's always important to make sure that those safety things are implemented as well.
True. And then in Bay Area, we see a lot of students, Uber drivers. They are on job, working 24 hours, night shifts, day shifts, and they go through accidents and they get, some have heart attacks. And what happens if you don't have any information with you? They are going to send it out to any other, Christian churches or any contacts that these hospitals or coroners that they have them. They send these Muslims there to cremate them. So students and Uber drivers, many of them, key thing is keep someone informed where you're going, what you have something written down, have it in your wallet. That way they can reach your friends and family, and then a proper Muslim burial can happen. And then the last one, the important thing is, request comes all the time. I want to, transport them to India, Pakistan, or Bangladesh, or a different state, just because their other dear ones are buried there. The one key thing that's important here is embalming. So when you ship or transport any deceased, embalming is required. Embalming is basically, it's a process where they take out all the fluids from your body and put in formaldehyde, fill it up with formaldehyde, which prevents decaying of the deceased. And so, and also these formaldehydes are very, cancerous, water soluble. So you don't want that to happen. You don't want your body to go through all those kind of, go through this embalming process, which is against, even our scholars here, ulama, they keep telling you don't need to transport anything. Just, bury them at the place of, in the place of death. You don't have to ship them to any other place or any other state. So these are key things that I wanted to bring to the attention, are the ones to remember, do's and don'ts. The next one I have here is the basic process here. So as soon as the funeral home or me gets an information about a deceased person, we get all the information. The funeral home is going to send a transportation to either a coroner's home or a hospital to pick the deceased and bring them to the masjid. And while the deceased is in the masjid, the funeral home is going to contact your doctor. So it's very important to have the doctor in the loop, because and to also let him know that he's going to get a call from the funeral home. If you don't have your doctor ready, the janazah, the ghusl cannot happen the same day. It'll have to be postponed. You have to put the deceased in the morgue for a couple of days. So you want to make sure the doctor is always on the picture and he's notified. And this way, the ghusl can happen and the janazah can happen on the same day. So here in Bay Area, we make it a point. If it comes at 8 in the morning, night, we do it on the same day till 1. So it's very key to have the doctor in loop. If doctor is on surgery, on vacation, now you are not able to get the burial permit and we can't do ghusl and the deceased can't be buried. So it's very critical that the doctor is informed, and he should be aware to pick the call from the funeral home, because the key thing is the cause of death. So it's without a cause of death from the doctor certifying, the county or the state cannot issue a burial permit. So it's very important.
I was just curious, and I'm not as familiar, but maybe if you know, or even Brother Munir, if you know, are there resources in the community? Because these are big costs and are they're reasonable, but they can be costs. Are there resources that for people can turn to if they can't afford these costs? Does the community have resources to help people?
Yeah, all our websites. So all our websites have a link. So I can share the link from our website here in the Bay Area.
Right.
So as soon as it basically lists, as soon as you hear anyone deceased, you go to our website, funeral service, and you have contact numbers. So we are here, 3 of us, the Imam, myself, always there 24/7 to pick up the calls. And we want to make sure that the janaza, the ghusl happens, and the janaza happens at the very same time on the same day, and he gets buried.
Yeah,
and also we do get calls that someone is sick, they're in the last stage. What should we do? And those are the times we quickly, go visit them. And we tell them this is what is needed. Especially, when they are in hospitals, you have all these tubes that are put into your body. We tell them to make sure the nurses there are there to take those out before or after their demise, basically. So those kind of pointers we let them know. We also have the paperwork, the details for filling up those forms available on the website, and also we have mobile apps where you can fill in those information. And this all happens within 4 hours. As soon as a person calls me and tells me there is a deceased person, it takes 2 hours to transport them to the masjid. And if you know ahead of time, we tell them, make sure the doctor is aware of this if you want to expedite the burial.
Yeah, it's great that, alhamdulillah, that there are resources out there to help people. And I will say, especially as people that, if we do have a place of privilege, is to really set aside these costs in advance. As we were putting together wills, set aside money like this. So if a funeral is going to cost roughly around $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, is set that money aside. Maybe it's $100 every year or this and that. Like if we buy sneakers that cost this much, like we should be setting this money aside, because let's not worry about our kids and our future loved ones to take care of that. Set that money aside now, create an account, move that aside. And so that is taken care of, because it's great that, alhamdulillah, that there are resources out there for families that can't afford these during very turbulent times. But we also don't want to strain those resources as well. We want to make sure those resources are for emergency purposes, for people that truly, truly, truly are in dire space. So if we can lessen that burden on these resources, let's set that money aside. And so that's something that I can't stress enough as well.
Yeah, and let me just say, this is Munir, that whenever there is someone, we call it the Indigent Muslim Fund. So the San Ramon Mosque and the MCC in Pleasanton, we both have a joint fund where we cover the cost, and we have a financial kind of a form application, and we ask for cost sharing from the family because it is a limited fund, and we usually do 4 or 5 a month of folks that cannot be buried by, and then MCA has a fund as well. So between the 3 organizations, we're able to cover pretty well, but it is a limited fund. So it's important for folks to have some savings, and we do ask that as well, if you could contribute anything towards the cost, so we're not covering the complete burden of the cost using community funds.
Yeah, and we're not here to do a fundraiser today, but yeah, it is important to support initiatives like this, because when families are grieving, the last thing you want to think about is, do I have to work a couple extra hours? How am I going to pay for this? It's really, really, really overwhelming. And so if we are in places of privilege, to not only think about our own funerals, but to help other families make their lives easier, it's definitely something worth considering. And may Allah reward each and every one of you for stepping up, because this is super, super, super difficult for many families. And it's great that there are resources out there to help people.
Yeah, mashallah, MCC does a lot. Our masjid also has some funds, but I mean, if you look at the cost here, the basic funeral services. So basically, as soon as the doctor is heard, states the cause of death, you get a burial permit. So the funeral home is going to charge around $2,000 here. And what it does is transportation, get this burial permit, and then the hearse to take it to the cemetery. So that's around $2,000. At the cemetery, this is Five Pillars Farm, which is a Muslim-owned cemetery here in the Bay Area, which is in Livermore. The adult burial cost is $5,900, and for a child, it's $2,500. And if it's weekend or a holiday, it's going to be $500 more.
Brother Abdurrahman, a question that just came up, and I think you touched base on it earlier, but if you can spell out a little bit more. What is a funeral home compared to the function at the masjid? Like if I lose a loved one, do I contact the funeral home? What role does the funeral home play? And what role does people like yourself and the masjid play?
Yeah, exactly. So that's a good question. So here, the funeral home is not exposed at all. It's always the masjid. So the first call that comes is the masjid from the link. And there are 3 contact numbers or 4 contact numbers, and the call comes to us first. And the family don't even have to worry about the funeral home at all. All they have to do is give us the information, or there's a mobile app, just fill that information, and the rest, we make sure, the funeral home is on top of it. We make sure the transportation is happening within 2 hours, and we make sure the ghusl happens in the masjid. So all that happens in the masjid is coordination and a ghusl facility. By the way, the MCA masjid does have a funeral director. So sometimes we work with the MCA masjid in Santa Clara to get the burial permit. But other than that, the family, all they have to do is work with the imam or the volunteers, and the website is there to update them as well. And they also get emails, So basically, our Lowry Masjid has a ghusl facility, and that's what happens in our masjid, and we coordinate with the funeral home. At the end of the day, they pay us. We pay the funeral home $2,000. We give them the invoice as well. As far as the cemetery is concerned, the individual has to pay the cemetery directly. And here it's going to be a cashier's check or a cash, no check. So cemetery, they directly take the cashier's check and pay the cemetery 5 pillars, and it's going to be for $5,000.
A question that's came up is, can you post a link in the chat to everyone for the website you mentioned and the phone number to contact?
Sure. So basically here, the cost is $7,900 to $8,400 if it's a weekend, and for a child, it's almost $5,000. So what it basically takes in the cemetery, right? What basically takes, what are the costs that goes into that $5,900? From what I am aware of is basically here in California, every grave, if you see the picture here, grave liner. So every grave has a grave liner. But in this picture, right, the top part is not going to be there. It's just from this part all the way to the bottom where you will see the mud. So you see it's just an outliner, and then there is a top cover. All these are made of concrete. So this is laid on every grave just because of the law in California, because of the earthquakes and stuff like that. So those are mandatory ones. The grave sites itself cost $2,000 per site here, and the rest of the $3,900 goes to this grave liner, endowment fee, the lid, the marker. So every grave has a marker with just name and the date, and then the opening and the closing of the grave cost. So they all cost $3,900. And then you have, so these are the main 2 costs. Most of the time, right, here in Bay Area, we use only a cardboard carrier, which is free, to carry the deceased with the coffin inside. So so this is also called casket, but this is not lowered with the deceased. So we just take the deceased person and lower him onto the grave. We don't use any other casket. But recently, I've seen people using, like Brother Hanif, who makes caskets. I've seen 2 or 3 lately, where some families demand that they want their dear ones to be buried in a wood wooden casket, which is around $500. It could be
Yeah,
like
and it varies state by state. Actually, in New Jersey, the law requires people to be buried in a box, and that's the only reason why people are placed in a box. So it's super simple.
Yeah, that's correct here as well. Actually, there are couple of cemeteries like the Lone Tree and a couple of other. They mandate them to be in the wooden caskets. So, but whereas with 5 pillars, which is a Muslim-run cemetery, there is no such requirement. So all we do is carry the deceased after coffin into the cardboard box, and then we take them near the grave, lift the body, and place him inside the grave. So this is the basic coffin, which I will go into the practical part in a bit. Basically, for men, we use 3 pieces of unstitched cloth. One is like a shirt, kameez, and one is a izar, like a lungi. And then
for those who don't know what a coffin is, can you explain what the
shrouding
of it is? Okay.
Yeah, this is basically we shroud after the ghusl, after the body bath. We shroud every deceased with the. So the sunnah is the 3 pieces of unstitched cloth, and this is just so one has a slit here. There's a back that it's like a shirt. There's a back part and the front part with a slit for the neck. And then there is the biggest piece, which is at the bottom, and then you have one for the trouser side, the izar. So these are the basic things, and this is the facility at our masjid. If you look at here, this is Lowry Masjid in Fremont, Islamic Society of East Bay. So we have a facility of 3 morgues here. So at any point of time, we have seen many times 3 deceased, and we do 3 janazas in a day at a time. And then we have this one, sometime, for a large person, we use these to lift and lower. And basically, this is the table where we, where we lay the deceased and do the ghusl. So basically, this is the table. There's a hole, and there are these lines to let the water run through at the end of it and get into the sink. And you have water, and these have ventilation, and the rooms are kept clean. So, and after every ghusl, we have someone come in, and it costs $150. So sometimes we also ask, the masjid also asks a donation, at least $150, just because it takes that much to clean up, after every ghusl. So this is the basic picture. So that's all I have at this point.
There's a couple questions.
Sure.
Yeah, again, if you can post obviously in a little bit, if you can post the link to the website you mentioned, the phone number. Somebody asked about, is there a place in the Livermore Cemetery dedicated for Muslims, or are all religions?
Well, that is dedicated to Muslims. And there are many other cemeteries which are Christian runs. They have a portion of the cemeteries which are Muslim ones. So there is a designated area within that which is Muslim ones. And obviously those will cost more, and it can go to $2,000-3,000 more. It could be even $14,000. We are talking about $8,500 here. That could be around $14,000. So there is also one in Sacramento, which is 2.5 hours away from the Bay Area up north. That is also a Muslim-owned cemetery, and that is a little bit cheaper because it's out of the Bay Area, and for the local people there, it's cheaper as well. But for people from the Bay Area, it's going to cost a bit more. So what we plan next is, so as soon as a deceased comes in, we prepare him for the ghusl. So there are 2 aspects to it. The ghusl is basically washing. So every deceased is given a ghusl to purify him, and then they are shrouded, and then they are put in the cardboard casket, and then after Zohar, the janaza prayer is led, and then they are taken by the hearse to the cemetery. So if we are ready, then we can jump into the ghusl as well as the washing as well as the shrouding.
Let's do that. In the meantime, Brother Munir, if you can send that, I think you accidentally sent those links to just the panelists. Can you send that to everybody in the chat? If you just select where it says 2 to everyone who can send those links. Those are
Will
great
do.
resources. Thanks.
Sorry, I have this video presentation as well as I could post. So Munir, is it from the Lowry Masjid or?
I'm putting on the MCC webpage,
Okay.
and then it links to the Lowry Masjid website.
Okay, perfect.
Oh,
Go ahead with your demonstration if you like.
Oh, okay. So is that okay, Aman? Brother
yeah,
Aman?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm going to use my mobile phone. And so basically what we are going to do, so what happens is, as soon as the disease, sometimes the disease come in the, directly when they come in, they are laid over the table. If it is over previous night, we store them in this morgue. And next day morning, so we generally encourage the family members. I personally encourage all the family members to participate, because the hadith says a person who involves in the ghusl, like Brother Hanif mentioned, 40 major sins are forgiven. But in addition to that, whatever we see, of the deceased, it's obligated upon us to keep it as amana. We are not supposed to share any kind of imperfections, lost limb, bloodshot wounds, or any kind of an autopsy things to reveal it to any spouse, or that's a key aspect of giving a ghusl, is to keep it to yourself till you die. Any kind of an imperfections or shortcomings of the deceased that we see, and then participate in the ghusl. 40 major sins are forgiven, and I and Tamim, we are here all the time, just to take advantage of those blessings, and the key thing is no recitation of Quran in the ghusl area. We all do wudu and come in. We make sure we have all our aprons and PPE. If it is a COVID, post-COVID, we make sure we have PPE kit. We wear them. We wear gloves, aprons, and head covering, as well as the shoe covering. All those, and we make sure. One dua that we allow or let people know is Allahumma gfir lahu, Allah forgive the deceased. We also make it a point to tell ourselves Allahumma gfirli, Allah forgive us. Apart from that, no recitation of Quran. Once the ghusl is complete and the washing and the shrouding, we take them into a room where we allow the mehrams to view the deceased, and then we cover the head. So those are the basic things. And one other key thing is the satar. Satar is modesty is very key in the Islamic religion. So for men, the satar is the area between navel to below the knee. So that area of the deceased is always closed. Anything we do under the hood, under the covers of that area, from the start to finish. So the first thing what we do is, if it is hospital, it's going to be a hospital bag. If it's a COVID case, it's going to be a double bag. Sometimes it comes from home with clothes. So what we do is we cover the satar. We're going to show in a second. Cover the satar and undo all the clothes. And also we make it a point, if we can remove any kind of wearables like watch, rings that are easily removable, we do that. Some people have the teeth sets. If there is no rigor mortis set in, and if it is easy to take out the false teeth, we take that as well. So those are a couple of key things. We don't let anyone cut nails or cut hair, none of those sort, and all these things removables, only if it is easily retrievable or taken out. If it is not, we leave it.
Yeah, I want to be mindful of time, so inshallah we can go ahead.
Okay.
So Brother Abdurrahman is just going to switch cameras real quick and get the demo to show you all what the washing process looks like. But a question that came up, and it's an important one, especially for people that have non-Muslims in their family, right? Maybe you embrace Islam and your vast majority of your family isn't Muslim. A question that often comes up is, what role can my non-Muslim family play in this process? And it's very important to understand this, because in Islam, your family is your family, right? We don't, if my brother or if my dad is not Muslim, I don't look at him as a non-Muslim dad. That's my dad, right? Or that's my brother, or that's my sister, that's my mom, right? And so your family is your family. And so it's really important to understand that and embrace that, because Islamically, we do have familial relationships and obligations to our loved ones. And so in a moment of a funeral, and if there's a washing, well, yes, Muslims will step up and do the washings. The men will wash the men, the women will wash the women. Families can be in the room. You can't be like, oh, you're not Muslim, get out of here. Or you're not this, you're like, get out. Like, your family is your family. And it's important that, again, we don't look at our family members as, oh, that's my non-Muslim sister and that's my Muslim brother or this or that. That is your family. And so it's important to really understand that, because I know that is often can be a tense moment. And it's just important to throw away, in my opinion. This is purely my opinion. I'm not a scholar, but it's important to throw away that cultural nonsense. Now, if a family wants to be a part of the process, again, okay, yes, the men will wash the men and the women will wash the women. That's more for adab purposes, pretty straightforward when you're handling private parts and this and that. But being in the room, saying goodbye to a loved one, and just seeing them for the last time, it is important that family is involved, and there's not this, you're not Muslim, you can't be in here kind of nonsense.
Okay, that's correct, Aman. So I had a case where the father was a Christian and the mother was the Muslim, and they had brought their son, and so it was kind of 50-50, where they would give a ghusl and then they would put them in a casket and go through a Christian way of burial. And I brought the gentleman into the ghusl area, because generally only a Muslim can give a ghusl to a Muslim, but I make it a point to get all the non-Muslims as well as the parent, father especially. And he was there watching the whole thing with so much of modesty that goes around it. He was breathless. I mean, he felt that, I mean, it motivated him, big time, to embrace even Islam, to the extent of how much care we give. That doesn't happen with Hinduism, where they are just cremated or on the wooden pyre, or most of the Christians do cremation. So those kind of things that you don't see with Muslim ghusl and burial. So before I'm going to switch on to the video, so turn on the video, I have a mannequin here that I just made up at home here. So I'm going to turn on the video here and show you the mannequin, and then we get started, inshallah. So basically, so this is, assume that this is the deceased, and I have him on the table, and it has it has some coverings probably. So the first thing what we do is we lay him down on the. So by the way, the Qibla for the deceased, or the living and the dead, as Prophet ﷺ said, is Kaaba. So we make sure that the person is laid in such a way that the right side of his is facing the Qibla, the Kaaba side. So that's we make it a point. And then before starting ghusl, we make an intention of giving ghusl to the Mayyit or the deceased, to purify him, and to also fulfill the obligation, as well as according to the Sunnah and for the sake of Allah. So with those intentions, and with those the things that I mentioned before about no Quranic recitation and those things, we start off undoing the clothes. So before undoing the clothes, I have Brother Tamim here. So what we do is, quickly, we have two towels. We just lay down 2 towels. There's another one as well. So we make sure, like I said, the satar. Satar is the area between the navel and below the knee. So that area we make sure is covered all the time. And so one vertically, so this way, one horizontally. So we make sure the satar is covered, and basically we undo the clothes. What we do is basically unzip, if it is a hospital bag or any kind of a thing, what we do is unzip everything. If you need, we turn him on his left or right, make sure each and everything is taken out of the deceased with the satar covered. We also make it a point, any kind of tubes, tubings, we take the consent. I mean, we ask the family members if they can take it out on our behalf, because we are no experts here while doing ghusl. That's why we tell, if they are in the hospital, to take out all those tubes and stuff away after they're deceased to the hospital. So we undo the clothes, any kind of patches, bed sores. If it is very hard to take it out, we let it stay there. But any kind of a thing like a bandage or anything, we make it a point to take it out with all this. And one key thing is, again, when we have the satar covered, whatever we do, we make sure that we don't gaze at the private parts of the individual at no point of time. All the time we have our gaze down, and we start off with this. And the first thing what we do, and this ghusl is washing. This ghusl washing is very similar to our Jummah ghusl that we give for our Jummah, or any kind of a ghusl that we give. Basically, there are three parts to it. The first thing we do is, before doing that, the first thing we do is to wash the private parts. So the private parts, and then any other area which has filth, we make it a point to clean all those first. And that is exactly what we do even in Jummah ghusl. And second thing is the wudu. Wudu is the second thing which we do, and the third one is a body bath. And one key thing is we always start from the right and then do the left. So these are the three major parts in a ghusl, which is very similar to what we do with our ghusl for Jummah or any other ghusl. So the first thing what we do is istinja, is to wash the private parts. Assume that the deceased is completely taken off the cloth. It's just the satar himself and the satar covered. The first thing we do is lift him up, and lift him up to the shoulder a bit and press his abdomen 3 times. So this way the bowel, we put all the muscles on the bowel, make sure that all impurities come out of the deceased. So that's the first step before we start with istinja. So for istinja, the rule is we make it a point. If you see there are many small cloths like this where we wrap around. We make it a point that the hand doesn't feel the private parts. And so we use small turkey towels like this, and we soak it in water, and we use soap as well. And there are few brothers, at least 5 or 6 around us, to hold those towels up. So he's holding one, so he puts his hand down and makes sure the front part of the private part is washed. So we do this and throw away those towels. We use as many as small towels are needed to clean the private on the front of the private part. And also I make it a point to make sure that the groin area, because these are the hard areas, make sure that those areas are also washed and cleaned until they feel good about this. Now, as soon as the top part and the groin is done, we tilt him or the deceased to the left, so that the right side of the private area from the back is cleaned. So you turn him, you move the towels a bit to the other side so that you don't are not able to see the private parts. Now you lift one of the leg here, so you have some clearance. So you reach out under the satar to wash the back side of the private part. So we make sure we do that. We again throw away as many small clothes we need, throw away. And the same thing, he will come over this side, or if I'm on this side, I make it a point to do it from the back side from this side. So this way, both the front and also once the back side of the private part is cleaned up, I make it a point also make sure that the lower back and other hard areas are also cleaned. So at this point, the first step after pressing the abdomen, the istinja, it will be complete. And in addition to that, then before going to the second step, which is the wudu, we make it a point, sometimes there are a lot of blood and other fluids coming out of the mouth and nose and stuff like that. So we make it a point to use a cotton swab to just clean up all those nasal. So we just take so the brother here has a cotton, so he will wet it up with a cotton and just clean up the nose, the left side of the nostril, the right side of the nostril, take out any blood or any of those that is there on the face, the ears as well. And sometimes because of the rigor mortis, you can't open the mouth wide. So we also make it a point to just use a cotton swab to wipe the lips as well and the teeth as well. So those are the part of the istinja where all the dirt is cleaned up. So that's number one. Now comes the wudu. The second part is the wudu. So we start with the right. We just wash the palms, the right palm 3 times and the left palm 3 times. The faraid of wudu is done. Basically, the faraid of wudu is washing the face 3 times between earlobe to earlobe, from the top to the bottom of the beard, every nook and corner of the face 3 times. Then we do the right arm till the so let's go and do it. So we're going to do take water, and we want to make sure the water doesn't go into the nostrils, into the body. So sometimes we cover the nose with our palm, and then we make sure that 3 times the face is washed. So that's the taking care of the wudu, the face part, which is the faraid. And then we make sure the kilal of the fingers, all the fingers, between the fingers are washed 3 times, all the way to the elbow, below the elbow of the right. So always we start with the right, and then we go to the left. So we started the face with the right, and then we go to the left side of the hand, all the way to the elbow 3 times. And the water we use is lukewarm water. So it's similar to what we take shower with. We feel good about the water. So we make it a point that it is a mixed hot and cold. And so it is good for so once that is done, the masa of the head is done. So we make sure the masa of the head is 1 time is enough for this. So, and some people can also extend it to go all the way to the ears. And finally, we come to the leg, ankle. We again kilal of the fingers from the right. So the sunnah way is from the right side, and you go all the way to the left side. So you do the kilal of the fingers, and also wash the ankles 3 times, and same thing with the right leg, and same thing with the left leg. So this basically completes the second part. So after istinja, we are done with the third one is we have to so now if you want to change before doing the wudu, if this gets dirty, we change them. Now we go to the final, giving a bath. All we do is 3 times water bath. We start before giving a bath, we make sure we close the nose and the ears. We plug it in with the cotton. We also cover the mouth and also the ears. And then we start with the body bath. The body bath basically is the right side. You have right side body bath 3 times, and with the hand under the arms, everything. Then we turn him around and give a bath on the back side, on the right side. And then we do the same thing with the left, and we complete the left. So this basically, and after this, we press the abdomen once again. The wudu is not necessary after that. We do that again. That completes. And the last is with the camphor. We have camphor is some kind of an aromatic stuff that we put in the water. And we run through him 3 times, and that completes the ghusl. All that completes the ghusl. And basically what we use is some kind of a camphor here tablets. We just crush them and put it in the water. It gives that aromatic. So this completes the washing, and we now dry him up. So once we dry him up, we go to the kafan. So is that okay now to go to the kafan part, Aman? Or
Yeah, we got about 2 or 3 minutes left. I want to give time. There's a couple questions that came in, but yeah, if you want to.
Okay. So what we're going to do is, like I said, there are 3 pieces of clothes. There's a big one. There's a small one. That's a small one. So there are 3 big. There are going to be 3 big cloths. Not this one. Other one. Okay, this is a big one. Okay. So we lay out the bigger cloth. So like I said, it's an unstitched piece of cloth. 3 big cloths. So we just lay out the top one, and then we have the trouser part. Sorry. Trouser, that one. So you can see the slit here. Can you show the slit? Yeah. So if you see here, basically, there's a slit here, and that's where the head is going to come. There's the top part of the shirt, and then you have the izar. So I think we're almost done. We'll just place the mannequin here, and we'll just wrap him around. Just put it quickly. That's it, right?
And I know we're covering a lot today, by the way. We will be sharing this recording as well as additional resources. We know there's so much to talk about and things to take away from this. And so, yes, we will gladly send each and every one of you.
So once it is dried up, once we are dried up, with the satar is still covered, So you see here the head, the shirt, the top part of the shirt, which is, the kameez that comes on top. And at this point, if there is itar, we put the itar on the body as well. And then with the satar covered, we can take out the two turkey towels. And we have changed the turkey towels a couple of times once it gets dirty. So we have the satar still covered. And the next one is the left side of the izar is, let's wait quickly, 2 minutes. So what we're going to do is just wrap around this, put it on the leg. And then we have the right side, which goes on top. So we have these two together, and then the outermost is the biggest one. So beneath this, there are three tie ropes. So basically, we tie the leg side, the midsection, and the head side. So with this said, the thing that I try to tell the family is what comes next is the three questions, that is asked in the cover, in the burial, and that is key. And I tell all the family members to prepare themselves to be in a position to answer those three questions: the Mar Rabbuka, Ma Dinuka, Man Nabiyuka. This is the question asked in the burial, by the Munkar and Nakir. And so it's very important for us to say, because our mouth is not going to speak, it's our conviction on those things that's going to, because the life of the hereafter is from the burial, once the person is buried, that's when the life of the hereafter starts. So I think that completes the wrapping, and we show the face for the mehrams, and then we tie them. So there's a tie rope at the bottom. We cover the midsection, the leg, and the head. So that completes.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. That is tremendous. And again, we will share this recording. It's a lot to process. And the good thing is, these aren't things that, inshallah, that we'll have to do by ourselves. There are volunteers at masajids and funeral homes and other places that will walk people through it. I want to get to a couple of questions, and one for you, Brother Abdurrahman, is we were talking about who can be in the room. What about in a mahram and a non-mahram case? So if there is a female body on the table, and let's say it's my sister-in-law on the table, as technically a non-mahram to that person, can I look at the person's face? Who's allowed to see the face of the people that are deceased on the table?
Yeah, after the shrouding, right? After the shrouding, the mehrams are allowed to see, but it's a decision of the family. If you ask a scholar, they're going to say it's not allowed for non-mehram to see, but for ultimately it's the family's call there. Some are there to get their video started to share with someone out in a different part of the world and stuff like that. So we tell them after this is to, it's safe not to show to Gair Mehram. It's because it's about the individual who passed away. He wants to make a safe transition into the qabr, into the hereafter, because he's waiting to go through the bliss, the bliss of the grave, and all those things, and he doesn't want something like this to not happen. But the call is ultimately the families.
Great. A lot of questions coming in. I want to be mindful of time. Again, we thank you all so much for taking the time on a beautiful Saturday afternoon to have this very, very important conversation. So definitely give yourself the space and the credit for doing that. A great question that came in from Arwa. Listening to Dr. Rami's presentation earlier on the Islamic perspective on death and dying seems to fit very well with the hospice philosophy of end-of-life care. However, there's a lot of families, for whatever reason, may not have the same embracing of it. They may have misconceptions. Dr. Rami, how do you think the hospice philosophy of end-of-life care fits with the Islamic perspective of dying?
Yeah, I think you don't have to turn any further than the Sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ was the best example on how to live, and that includes to the very last moment that he was on this earth. And if you looked at the last 14 days, roughly, of his life and how he was dealing with illness, I think you can learn all that you need to know about what would be important for us as Muslims at the end of life. I think he provided us the perfect manual. And hospice, just to introduce it to people who don't know, is a approach to care. It's not an actual place. Most hospice is actually provided at home, at a person's own home, where everything is geared towards comfort. So people on hospice don't want to see the inside of a hospital again. Keep me as comfortable as possible for whatever time might be left. And I would say, from an Islamic standpoint, if there were any more honorable way to die than at home and in the arms of your loved one, then the Prophet ﷺ would have died that way. He died on his wife's bosom, on Aisha radiallahu anha, speaking with her, seeing his family members and community members in and out. And that was important in the last days of his life. And we should do our best to emulate it. Now, it's a packed question because a lot goes into making the transition to hospice from a medical standpoint. I think the onus is on doctors to have good communication about health status, prognosis, treatment options, etc. Also to have families to figure out what's important for a person, at the end of life. But I do think that Islam and the hospice philosophy go hand in hand. I may be biased because I'm in this field, but yeah.
Yeah, and again, more reason to have these conversations when people are happy and healthy, and ask what their preference is. And there's actually great resources out there. I do want to shout out. Let me see if I can bring them up real quick. Let me just load this up. I know we're tight on time. There's a website, shariawiz.com. They help you put together legally certifiable Islamic wills in all 50 states for $100. And they actually are $100 is great. And so you literally go online, it asks you a bunch of questions. You can put together healthcare directives. I think that one is like $59. And it's certifiable and you can change it as you go. So let's say in a few years, you decide, okay, I don't want to use this anymore. They're a great resource. And they actually, and I'll post them in the chat, but they actually gave us a promo code of 2 gods. So for a 20% discount. So instead of $100, it's $80. And that's a will. You can spell this all out saying, put me in a hospice. Don't intubate me if something like this happens, or do intubate me, or do this or that. Or I want these people in the room during a janazah. You can spell that all out in a will so that your family and your future loved ones don't have to fight and argue over this. And so I definitely recommend, no matter what your age is, start thinking about these things and document those, because these can be very, very emotional and explosive things. And it's important to address that. Brother Abdurrahman, a question that came in. You had mentioned that there is barakah in keeping the body washing private, not to talk about what you see in the room. And actually in our film, for those who've seen the documentary, we actually, even though we have consent to the families, we don't show faces. We don't show any kind of marks that reveal who that person is, to respect the people's privacy and family. What are your thoughts on, let's say a family member can't make it, or a family member overseas, if somebody FaceTimes them or puts the body washing on Zoom, is that okay? What are your, I'm sure that's come up before, where somebody wants to show loved ones. What do you recommend in a situation like that? You're on mute, brother.
Yeah. So I have seen, I mean, most of the families don't encourage, but I have seen instances where one of the brother or the son is in UK, and so there was a FaceTime that was going on with during the ghusl. So except for the immediate family members who are away, and it is son of the, a son who is away from home, I've seen. Otherwise, in most of the cases, we don't encourage FaceTime or anything within, external set of people. But most of the time, it's just the immediate families, the son, the father, the brother, or the immediate family members need to participate, and they are more than happy to not share with anyone. But I have seen instances where, for the, other son or the brother who couldn't make it, a FaceTime was allowed. Or, it's again the family thing. We tell them it's the family who is going to make the call there.
Exactly. Your family is your family. And we don't make the distinctions like, oh, you can't be in here, you can't watch, or this or that. It's important that it's a very difficult time. And like I said before, we each have different ways of dealing with this. And so that is not the time to say, oh, you can't watch, or you can't do this, you can't do that. If it's reasonable, it's not creating a burden. If it's on someone's phone, again, it's not encouraged. It's important just to focus, but we're not going to turn anybody away, right? And it's important to do that. I do want to give a last call if there are any more questions. And again, I know we didn't cover everything. There's so much more to talk about. I guess Dr. Rami, and we will send some resources about this, but how do you bring this conversation? What do you recommend? I know this is more of a family practitioner question, but how do you bring up these conversations with your mom and dad about their preferences? What advice would you give to someone?
I like 3 things. Number one, just say, I need help with something. Seriously. Once you start off with saying, hey, I need your help with something, and it's somebody who you love and you care about, right? Imagine your father or your mother asking you that they need help with something. Your ears are going to perk up and say, okay, what do you need? So starting off with that. Another way is to reference somebody in the family that died, right? Uncle Muhammad, how he died, how he spent his last days. I want to talk to you about that and what I would want. And I thought this happened well and I would want it for myself, or I saw this happen and I would never want it for myself. And then last but not least, if you don't have anybody to blame for bringing up this conversation, you can always blame your doctor, right? My doctor really thinks we should have this conversation. So do you mind just taking some time to go through an advance directive with me to tell you what's important to me at the end of my life? Yeah, I think those are 3 prompts that I really like to encourage people to use when doing advanced care planning.
Great. That is fantastic. And I want to be mindful of the time, but thank you all so much. Again, we can't thank you enough because I keep saying it, but I have to keep saying it. It's just, you could be anywhere else. And the fact that you all are even taking the time to join us just shows the importance that you place on how much you love your family and your loved ones. And may Allah reward you for taking this time. And I assure you that with this information, it will make things so much more easier, because there's no easy way to deal with this. But these little things, just even having a conversation, giving yourself 5 minutes just to even think about this, makes things infinitely times easier and more bearable when they happen. And so we thank you again. And inshallah, we will, like I said, we will send you out this information along with your recording. With that, Brother Munir, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say or anything else you want to plug for the MCC, or. He's just overcome with joy. And thank you all again. And again, thank you to the folks at the MCC for putting this on. Keep supporting these programs. It's important that we support programs like this and organizations that are involved with this. And so thank you all so much for joining us today. Assalamu alaikum.